Hello, how y'all doing? So, this is my second attempt at reviewing the Firefly Funhouse match. But actually, what happens is I just went back and looked at the match again, and I've not more understand it now. But I also decided to do a little bit more stretching to help other people who might not have understood it, what's really going on in it. So the first thing I want to do is we got to talk about this match in two different stages. We're going to talk about the characters first, then we're going to talk about the setting, then what actually happened. Okay, so that's three stages because there's more than just one thing to this match. So the first thing we need to talk about is the characters. So in psychology, there's this thing called archetypes, right? And I love this book called King Warrior Magician Lover by Robert Gillette and uh no Douglas Gillette and Robert Moore. And it's a fantastic book about male archetypes and male psychology. But I'm just going to skip most of that because I have videos on this type of stuff coming out later. I've been preparing them, and this just seems like a good time to kind of introduce the subject. So let's introduce John Cena. So John Cena is what's called a warrior archetype. He lives by a code. He eschews personal attachments. He's a destroyer. He's either a sword or a shield. Either he's a destroyer of the status quo or a revolutionary, or he's a defender of the status quo, which would be kind of like a soldier. So if you look at the history of the John Cena character, he's either been a revolutionary or a soldier. We already know that he does a lot of the saluting and stuff like that. But when he was a rapper gimmick, when he was doing the rapper gimmick, he was more of a revolutionary. He was kind of changing the business at that point, right? So Cena's code has always been hustle, loyalty, and respect. So that's his code, and we understand the John Cena character. But to give you a little bit more idea of the revolutionary or soldier aspect of the John Cena character. So Cena as a newcomer was essentially a sword, right? Like what I was talking about. He's either a revolutionary or he's a soldier. So as a revolutionary, Cena had to take his rapper gimmick and compete against established heels. So if you remember back in 2004, 2005, when Cena was really on his upswing, he had to really feud with people who had been around a lot longer than he had. You know, Kurt Angle, Chris Jericho, Triple H, JBL, who he won the title from. He had to establish himself by beating people who were already established. So this is his revolutionary act of coming into his own and changing the business because he was the face of the business, right? So now he has to become the face of the business. And he has to come from the outside in. So Cena gets in around 2000, late 2005. Cena is, well, 2006 rather. Well, maybe early 2006. Cena is sort of an established babyface now, right? Even though people were booing him and all that type of stuff. But so now it kind of changes. Now Cena is the undisputed face of the business. There is no idea that he's going to lose to Triple H or anything like that. And now he has to defend against more up and coming heels. Number one being Edge, right? Even though Edge had won the title in 2006, Edge was not really Cena's main rival until late 2006 after he got done feuding with Triple H. So you had, Edge and Muhammad Hassan and Chris Masters and all these new faces that were new to the main event scene that John Cena had to feud with. So he was sort of the soldier. He was the defender of the status quo, which is the John Cena WWE, right? Much like how Hulk Hogan had defined what the WWE is, John Cena was now defining what the WWE is. And his protection of that was fighting off up and coming heels. Even though Edge had been around in the company about almost 10 years before this point. But, Edge wasn't really a main character. So that's John Cena. John Cena is the warrior archetype. Then you have Bray Wyatt. So Bray Wyatt is what's called the magician archetype. What it is it's a knower, an initiate, somebody who follows someone else, and they learn. They're a guide through life. They're a keeper or a protector of a sacred space. They go out and they seek knowledge. They collect that knowledge and then they bring it back to society to teach society what society needs to know. To give you a good idea of what a magician would be, it would be like a professor or a priest, right? Like a priest reads the Bible, and then they go and they speak to a bunch of other people who probably have not read the Bible, and then they tell them what the Bible. They interpret the Bible for them, right? A professor interprets a textbook for a student. So Bray Wyatt interprets the world for his fan base, or his Fireflies, for the people who follow him. That's what he does. So you can look at the way all the Bray Wyatt's rants and all that type of stuff to understand that he has a pretty twisted view of reality. It's called the trickster, right? The trickster is the Jungian shadow version of of a magician. So the trickster is an evil version of the knower. They're a manipulator. They're a liar. They guide you with using information, but it's selectively edited information. They they're basically a liar and a manipulator, and people who have an agenda. So if you have a specific agenda as a magician, you can go out and edit certain information to produce an argument that you think is best suits your fan base or best suits your agenda. So you can, of course, see this in, in the Bray Wyatt character and how he approaches everything. When he used to say he's the new face of fear, when he was anyone but you, Roman, he would go out and basically, it's a recurring theme in the Wyatt story that he always puts himself as the underdog, and he always puts himself into the position of just being cast out or being mistreated. This is another thing that Raven used to do. In the cult leader, you always make it seem like you're the one that's being bullied and picked on. And that's what, that's the match. So the magician is the keeper of the sacred space. Now, what is the sacred space? Now, the sacred space is, this comes from the Mircea Eliade book called The Sacred and Profane. And what it is it's about a sacred space is an area that it makes itself, the sacred comes from the profane. Now, what the sacred is the holy, right? So something is holy, and it becomes holy after, making itself known throughout the profane world. So you have a lot of, like, think of a church. A church is a sacred space, right? You have confessionals within churches, so that's a sacred space within a sacred space. And if you're a priest, then you're in the church, but you might also be, sit and listen to people confess their sins. That would be your sacred space. And Bray Wyatt, sacred space, obviously, well, now it was his, Sister Abigail's cabin, but Randy Orton burned it down. So now his sacred space is the Funhouse. And this is where John Cena makes his mistake. As the warrior archetype, Cena wants to fight. That's what he really wants to do. So Cena arrogantly steps into the Funhouse, which is Wyatt's sacred space, and gets flipped upside down, turned inside out, and it's not a physical match. It is a psychological game that Bray Wyatt decides to play with him. Now, this is where we introduce sort of the sacred space or the match. So at the beginning of the actual match itself, Bray Wyatt explains to us what the Funhouse is, right? So he tells us that the Funhouse is a place where a world beyond ours, right? Where our darkest desires are not secrets. So essentially, going back to the magician archetype, right? He knows what we really want. He knows who we really are inside, and the Funhouse is going to expose us. It's a world where gods, monsters, demons, and angels are neighbors. So if you're neighbors with somebody, you live next to them, you might have a good relationship with them. So this kind of breaks down. This means that, barriers are being broken down. They're not enemies per se. They just live in different houses in the same neighborhood. So he wants to look at who John Cena really is. That was the opening montage of the Bray Wyatt part of this Firefly Funhouse match after the Cena entrance. After you get Cena's entrance, you get Wyatt's entrance, and he says all this stuff. So this story is about John Cena exposing himself because he arrogantly stepped into the Funhouse and thought that he was just going to beat up Bray Wyatt. And this actually is a gut punch to us as the audience, because we think that John Cena is just going to step into the Funhouse and start physically fighting Bray Wyatt. But that's not what happens. What happens is John Cena steps into the Funhouse and is completely overwhelmed, just like we were. We stepped into the Funhouse thinking it was going to be a real match. It was not a match, right? John Cena thought it was going to be a fight. It was not a fight. What it was is, and it wasn't really a mockery either. It was Bray Wyatt exposing John Cena. It was essentially an essay in visual form that was in a lot of coded language. So let's go into his essay. For starters, I just said John Cena is a soldier archetype who lives by code. And to live by a code, you have to essentially adhere to it. If you don't adhere to your code, you're a hypocrite, right? You hold other people to standards that you don't hold yourself to. And this is the crux of the Bray Wyatt argument, is that Cena holds other people to standards that he doesn't hold himself to. And so you have to look at the hustle, loyalty, and respect. And Bray Wyatt shows you in detail, kind of, how John Cena did not adhere to hustle, loyalty, and respect. So the first thing we learn is, let's talk about the hustle first. So the hustle is to the work ethic and all this sorts of things. And we learned that early in Cena's career, he had no hustle. He didn't have any. He didn't really know who he was as a performer, but he was lazy, right? He came in with the plain tights and just saying ruthless aggression and trying to hit people, right? That goes back to the warrior archetype. The warrior likes to fight. So that's really what the Cena was doing. He came in, ruthless aggression, and he tries to hit him. And Bray Wyatt symbolically ducks the slap, unlike Kurt Angle, who got slapped, right? So they reenact this scene with John Cena trying to slap Bray Wyatt and Bray Wyatt ducking. That should set the standard and let people know this is not a match, right? This is not about physical confrontation. This is about Bray Wyatt messing with John Cena. So we see that John Cena did not have any loyalty, no hustle, right? And that John Cena is a former bodybuilder. This is legit, right? So when you get the Saturday night's main event part of the story, you see that Cena is just lifting weights, and that's all he does in this whole scene. Is he's cutting a wrestling promo from the '80s, the Johnny Large meet. He's just going on and on about, he said some pretty cool stuff in that promo. I don't want to lose track of thought trying to remember it, but he's just pumping iron, right? Because that's what he thought a wrestler was. This is the lack of hustle, right? He didn't do his due diligence and learn about the business. He just thought, I look the part and that's it, right? I look like Hulk Hogan in the 80s or Paul Orndorff or all those big muscly guys, Rick Rude. I look like them. Therefore, I am like them, right? And then you see that when, John Cena's trying to fight, he couldn't move his arms, right? Meaning that he had overworked himself and he become essentially impotent. He looks great, but he can't work, right? So that's a really scary concept, but it happens a lot because it happens to you see various wrestlers who have great bodies, but they can't move, like Lex Luger or Chris Masters or somebody like that, right? They just look the part. So that's really a key moment to show you that hustle is not just activity; it's also doing your due diligence and learning about what you're doing before you do it. And John Cena did not do that. He just went to the gym, got really buff, and then decided, that's who I am now. I'm a pro wrestler because I'm buff, and I was a wrestling fan when I was a kid, and that's all I really needed. But that wasn't true. He needed to learn the business, which is why he almost got fired. And this is why Cena says this is, well, not Cena, but Wyatt says this is Cena's biggest failure, is that he was given a spotlight when he wasn't prepared, and all Cena did was say ruthless aggression and throw a punch, right? Instead of trying to learn the business and make an impact in a different way, he went straight to physical combat because he's basically a brute, right? This is what Bray Wyatt is trying to tell us. John Cena is not a hero; he's a brute. So loyalty, right? So loyalty is the second part of John Cena's code. So we know that should be the easiest one for people to see, because John Cena currently is in Hollywood doing movies. He's doing a lot of commercials and stuff like that. But this is the stuff he used to lambast The Rock for doing, right? So you had The Rock who left to do movies and stuff like that. And John Cena always talks shit about The Rock, who left to do movies, about being disloyal and all that type of stuff. Now John Cena has done it, right? And this is the parallel with Hulk Hogan in the WCW Nitro segment. See, in the WCW Nitro segment, it's part of it is that Eric Bischoff was able to seduce Hulk Hogan into turning heel. But another thing is that John Cena wanted to be like his hero Hulk Hogan, and Hulk Hogan was in movies. So John Cena wanted to be in movies. And now you look at it, and at some point during this whole thing, Wyatt says you will do anything for fame. And basically, he is saying that whatever it takes to be famous, John Cena will do it, and that he has no loyalty to anybody. And another thing is the whole when he brought up, he had a reference to Nikki Bella in the early part of the match, quote unquote. Basically, when John Cena proposed to Nikki Bella, he didn't go through with it. Now, this is of course part of the whole warrior archetype is that you eschew personal attachments. You don't allow personal attachments to impede what you're doing at your singular goal, right? And he did propose to Nikki Bella and all that type of stuff, but it was done mostly for show and for and for that quote unquote WrestleMania moment. And they didn't go through with it. Of course, Nikki Bella is going to marry somebody else now. So that's the loyalty part of it. So then you have the respect part. So the respect part of the hustle, loyalty, respect, and you go to the rapper gimmick of John Cena, which again was which was nakedly disrespectful, right? He used to turn people's weaknesses into jokes, and this is where you get the joke part of the promo of the match or whatever. We're Cena standing there rapping, and without a crowd to hype him up, the jokes are falling flat. So you get the cricket sounds and you get some childish laughter in the background. Basically, Cena is appealing to young audiences. He's not really grasping the concept, and he's basically being mean, right? And this is another thing. I talked about this in my WrestleMania 36 video, that Cena, what he does is that he often, as a babyface, would bully heels, and he would do things that was unheroic and as a heel, as a babyface. And he would do this as far as the rapper gimmick. He would belittle people. He would often talk down to them. He would, and he was doing that to Bray Wyatt leading up to this feud, where he would say, he would just call him Husky Harris. And he would just, say it's Husky Harris in a mask and all this type of, and all this sort of thing, right? The disrespect of other people. And, that's hypocrisy, right? So Cena is a hypocrite at every level. He doesn't really have hustle. He's not loyal. He doesn't have any respect, right? So we see that Wyatt has shown us through his selective editing of the John Cena history that Cena is not a real heroic character. So then what happens is we get the temptation, right? So the temptation is with the chair, right? But let's go back to talk about the disrespect. The disrespect part is, I talked about it before, but in Cena's history, he always disrespects other characters. He disrespects males, females, whatever. But not just in the rapper gimmick, also throughout his career. I talked about the best joke that John Cena ever told was when he told it was a fat joke on Vicky Guerrero, where he says she wakes up in sections. Like that sort of stuff is really important for you to have recognized in order for this thing to make sense, because you see that Cena as a character really is a fraud, and that's really what Bray Wyatt wants us to see. So let's go to the temptation. The temptation part is after Wyatt does his woe is me tale, where let's talk about the woe is me tale for a second, because like I said, Bray Wyatt is a character that is always going to paint himself as being the good guy, right? I'm the good guy, because he's supposed to be the devil, right? This is part of being the trickster. Is the trickster is the devil. So he's always like, woe is me. So Wyatt says, I was red I was the color red in a world of black and white. Essentially, I stood out. I was sacred. I stood out, everybody, and I dared to stand out. I dared to be myself, and other people ridiculed me for it. And this was supposed to be my big moment. WrestleMania 30, this is my big moment. And John Cena took it away from me, So, and he says, like, Cena is supposed to be a man of the people. He was supposed to be a man of the people. He's supposed to listen to the people. And without saying these words, what he's saying is John Cena should have put him over at WrestleMania 30. That if you was listening to the audience, you would have volunteered to put me over at WrestleMania 30. But you didn't, because you're selfish, right? and you all you care about is yourself. That was the whole idea behind Wyatt, wearing the Hawaiian shirt and all that type of stuff, right? And he says that when he has him in the Sister Abigail position, and Wyatt lets him go, he says we both know that that's not going to be enough. Essentially saying that just calling you a hypocrite is not going to be enough. I kind of have to do a little bit more, you know, to say that you are to prove it, you know. And of course, he calls Cena the golden child, the golden goose. You get infinite amounts of chances. And this is another thing that goes to a lot of the callbacks, is you get to see a lot of Cena's losses and humiliations and sort of things like that, where he got an opportunity to come back from it, while John Cena lambasts Bray Wyatt for all his losses and his lack of we give Bray Wyatt too many opportunities, is what John Cena has said in the run up to this match, is that how many opportunities are we going to give Bray Wyatt? It's time to move on. Bray Wyatt is done. He's he's overhyped or whatever. But Wyatt is now showing us that John Cena has a lot of opportunities as well. We show that he dropped the ball against CM Punk. We show that he dropped the ball against Batista, dropping the ball against Roman Reigns, and, all his various big time losses. And we get to see that. So that was a nice point. But it's also an attack to us, the fans, because part of the reason Bray Wyatt is a self-aware character. He's overly self-aware, in so much that he knows what people are saying about him, and he incorporates that into his match, like the Rambling Rabbit. Like, he knew that people used to say he cut these rambling promos that didn't mean anything, and so that's what Rambling Rabbit is. Rambling Rabbit is the character that used to just talk randomly and lose the audience, but it was sort of engaging. So that's what Rambling Rabbit is in the Funhouse, is people who used to say that Bray Wyatt cut nonsensical promos, so that's what Rambling Rabbit is. So as a character that is very self-aware, Bray Wyatt knows that he has been lambasted a lot online for losing big matches. Essentially, most of the biggest matches that Bray Wyatt has ever had, he's lost, right? And he gets lambasted by, the wrestling media and a lot of the fans for being a loser, that he loses a lot of big matches. And he's showing that Cena sometimes loses a lot of big matches too, but you give him more opportunities. You don't give me opportunities. You don't give me a chance. You give Cena chances. And it would have worked with just about anybody, because most of the time these things happen, right? But he's telling not just John Cena, but he's telling also us, the audience, that you gave up on me, that you guys belittled me, but now I'm who I'm supposed to be, which is the Fiend, and I'm going to turn all of this around. And it's an interesting thing, because John Cena calls Bray Wyatt Husky Harris routinely, like again and again. That's another thing that you see online. So Bray Wyatt obviously must Google himself, or vanity search himself on Twitter and see people saying like, "Oh, it's just Husky Harris in a mask," which I have seen people say 100 times on Twitter. Oh, he's just Husky Harris in a mask, and he can't work, and he can't do this, he can't do that. And so Wyatt basically incorporates this into the story via John Cena. So basically what John Cena is saying about him is what the internet has been saying about Bray Wyatt, that he's overhyped, that he is, it's all smoke and mirrors. He's still just Husky Harris, a fat goof who can't maintain his own body weight and all this sort of, and he can't move, he can't do this, he can't do that. And people not giving him a chance. And this is basically what he's dumping onto John Cena. So then we get to the temptation. We get to the end. So Cena, they recreate WrestleMania 30, where you have where Bray Wyatt tempted John Cena with the chair at WrestleMania 30. And he says, come on, hit me, John. And he gets down on his knees and he's hitting me, John. WrestleMania 30, Cena wants everybody to think that he's a hero. So he does not hit Bray Wyatt with the chair, because for starters, Bray Wyatt didn't have a weapon, right? So it's unheroic, and it's, kind of cowardly to hit a guy with a chair when he does not have a weapon himself. So John Cena does not hit Bray Wyatt with the chair. He resists the temptation. He resists the apple, and then he wins, right? He wins. So this is how he wins. He wins by resisting the devil's temptation, saying, I am who I say I am. I'm a hero and I'm willing to risk it. And I'm willing to risk losing. So I'm not going to hit you with this chair. I'm going to fight you like a man one-on-one and I'll win. And boom, that's what happens at WrestleMania 30. But that was in the realm of John Cena, right? John Cena's realm as the Warrior is a physical combat situation. In WrestleMania 30, that's what they were doing. They were in a physical combat, a physical fight where Cena felt far more comfortable beating Bray Wyatt up with his hands. In this situation, they're in a psychological war, right? So when Cena gets the chair, he takes the shot, right? Because inside, John Cena is not the hero that he wants everybody to think he is. So now that they're in the Funhouse, Wyatt has already exposed Cena as being a hypocrite and a liar and a manipulator and all that type of stuff. Cena, maybe it's a situation where we're asking the question of whether Cena knows we're there or not. So then he picks up the chair and he takes the shot, right? He swings and he misses. This is the equivalent of Eve eating the apple in the Garden of Eden, right? Now Cena has let the Fiend in. He has accepted the Fiend's call, right? He's answered. So now what you see is that John Cena has essentially if you look at what the Fiend says, he says stuff like "let me in." This is what he means by that. Like, listen to me, let me manipulate you, let me lead you astray, and this is what John Cena does. He lets the Fiend in, he lets the Fiend corrupt him. So now he took that shot, he fucked up. All right, so now he's shown his weakness, and now the Fiend emerges. So now when the Fiend emerges, Bray Wyatt is gone. So now John Cena has to fight the Fiend, and on equal footing. This is where they start having a quote unquote match, and the Fiend obliterates John Cena because he mentally took him out of the fight. Earlier in the match, you see where Cena is punching. He attacks Wyatt earlier, and he's just throwing punches, and he ends up beating up on Huskus, the pig. But the images that you see are of Cena losing and Cena failing, and that Cena is afraid of failure. That Cena is now dealing with failure, and that's what he's thinking about. He's thinking about his own failures, and he's trying to sort of overcome and punch those failures instead of dealing with them in a different way. And he's projecting onto Bray Wyatt, and this is sort of his sins. So if you ever read a Ghost Rider comic book, or if you ever seen the Ghost Rider movie, Ghost Rider is a comic book character from Marvel Comics, and he's the spirit of vengeance. So what the Ghost Rider does is he appears and he does his finishing auto kill technique. Is called the penance stare. And so what happens is the Ghost Rider will stare into your eyes, and you will die screaming at the weight of your own sins. That's essentially what happened to John Cena in the Firefly Funhouse match. Is that John Cena had to stare face to face with his own sins, his own hypocrisy, his own brutishness, his own lies, his own manipulations, and he wilted under that weight. So he could not deal with his own failures. He couldn't deal with his own hypocrisy, and he wanted a way out. And that way out was him just hitting Bray Wyatt with a chair. That's really what it is. He says, I want this nightmare to end. I'm gonna hit this motherfucker with a chair. And it didn't work. But in doing so, he entered the Fiend's world. He already entered the Fiend's world, but now he's appropriately, if you look at it in terms like food, he's a well-cooked steak, Now he's ready for the Fiend to devour him, and that's what happens. And John Cena loses. So that's really how the Firefly Funhouse match went. It is a really deep dive into John Cena's character, and I hope I did some type of I hope y'all enjoyed this, because I did put some thought into it, and I didn't have to do a lot of research because I had already done the research for this type of stuff, because I was going to do videos on these character archetypes later. So it just popped into my head on the second watch that, if you look at this, it's essentially a debate between Cena and Wyatt, with Cena saying, I am who I say I am, and Wyatt saying, no, you're a fraud, and I'm going to expose you as a fraud. But also, Wyatt is a trickster. He is a villain. He is not a hero. So you have to understand that Wyatt is deceptively editing John Cena's career, right? He is showing us that John Cena is this liar and this manipulator, but he's also not showing us the positive things that John Cena has actually done. So he's not showing us John Cena's heroics. He's showing us John Cena's hypocrisy. So some people seem to think that we need one more match between these two, and I agree with that. Like, you probably need, because you had a match on the physical realm, the WrestleMania 30 match, which John Cena won, and then you had the match in a psychological realm, which Bray Wyatt won. So maybe you need to have a match that kind of incorporates both, but you really don't need to, because John Cena was kind of deleted from the Funhouse, you know. So it was really like, I release you. Like, I've shown that you're weak, emotionally, you're weak mentally. You know, I crushed you. Be gone. And that's really what John Cena deleting himself, or being deleted from the Funhouse, really meant, is that you can go now. You know, I've done what I needed to do. You can go now. So with that said, you guys can go now. So like this video, share this video, and hopefully somebody can, you know, add to my theories that I have in this video. And I'll talk to you guys later. And I hope you guys can watch the match again and sort of enjoy it and see what I've been talking about. All right, later.